Good evening, everyone. This is a meeting of the Expenditure and Revenue Study Committee Futures Subcommittee at 5 o'clock on December 17th. We're going to start with a roll call of the members. Cliff? Cliff, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cliff? Val?
Yes.
And did I see Sadaf?
She just joined.
And Chair Green. Are you present, Chair Green? I see you. He's tied up, but he's present, but he's busy. He warned us about that. So I think with that, we can start with the first item on our agenda, which is a second follow-up presentation from the Brookline Solar Working Group, who want to talk to us a little bit about their thinking of a solar initiative for the town. And we're very fortunate to have with us as our guest, again, Vikram Agarwal. Vikram, do you need to be unmuted?
I think I am muted now, and I can share my screen.
Sergio, are you speaking? And what happened here?
I am speaking.
Okay, now I hear you. Sorry.
And Vikram, it's all yours.
Great. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Hope everybody is doing great and ready for the holidays. So this is a follow-up discussion to our meeting exactly a month ago on November 17th. So for today's discussion, I'll just review a little bit of what we had discussed back on November 17th. We will talk to you about some of the updated analysis that we have conducted on the various sites we had initially identified for solar installations. We will talk to you a little bit about next steps and open it up for questions and answers. But please do not hold back. I would love to take questions all throughout whenever you have any questions. So as you may remember, we started this discussion about a month ago, and we talked about potentially leveraging solar photovoltaic as a way to reduce the town's operating costs over the next 20 to 25 years and to make material contribution to our decarbonization efforts. As Sergio mentioned, I'm part of the solar working group member. I'm also a member of the town's Zero Emission Advisory Board. So we are currently working on the climate and resilience plan, which is just about complete. And this initiative is high on the agenda of the CARP. So as we had discussed, Brookline is slated to spend about $3.7 million in electricity this year. And this cost of electricity is expected to increase pretty dramatically over the next upcoming years. Historically, electricity prices have risen about 3%, but going forward, the Energy Information Administration estimates that this cost could rise anywhere from 4 to 6%, as you all know, because of the rise in AI and related data center construction. Brookline currently has solar on 7 municipal buildings. The 8th one is coming on at Driscoll High School. About 5 of them are owned, 2 of them are owned by the town, and 5 of them have power purchase agreements for those installations. And our analysis has concluded that owning solar installations is significantly advantageous in terms of financial results for the town. The other fact that we are noticing is that a number of Massachusetts municipalities have already moved forward with large-scale solar installations, mostly to achieve cost reduction and decarbonization goals. So we are not leading the pack here. We are more on the following edge. So to give you on the next slide a quick view of where we believe the electricity prices might head over the next 20 to 25 years. So as you can see, over the last 25 years, the inflation has been pretty moderate. But even if that moderate inflation continues, as you can see within the orange line, we could be seeing electricity rates more than double. And if they do increase based on what the EIA is projecting, the Energy Information Administration is projecting, we could be seeing tripling or quadrupling of our electricity prices over the next 20, 25 years. So this electricity costs for the town are likely to be quite burdensome going forward. Any questions so far? Okay. I wanted to share a couple of pictures with you. What we are also seeing is that carports at parking lots are becoming very popular all across Massachusetts. Actually, not just around Massachusetts. They are getting very, very popular around the country. People really like them because they are providing tremendous benefits throughout all seasons. In the summer, they keep your cars cool. During rain and snow, they keep your cars dry and you don't have to clean your cars. And what they're also doing is they are limiting the heat island effects that we see in parking lots. Carports can reduce the temperature of the parking lots by 20 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Here are a couple of examples in our own backyard. The picture on the left is at the Wayland High School, and picture on the right is a carport at the Worcester Business Center. Another quick picture. I'll just won't dwell on it too much, but these are nice looking installations, and they're providing a lot of financial and non-financial benefits. We are also seeing solar being installed on landfills. It's a very common very popular location for installing solar because you can't really do much with that land. So you see this is a solar installation on a landfill in Tewksbury. Last but not the least, we have already, as I mentioned, we have about 7 installations already in Brookline. Solar on rooftops actually is really good. It can be pretty much out of sight. So this is an example of solar on commercial buildings. So as we move forward, if you may remember from a month ago, initially we had identified a number of sites where we could potentially install 9 megawatts of solar, generating almost 90% of the town's electricity usage. Since then, what we have done is we studied these sites a little bit more and have identified a shorter list of tier 1 sites where we believe we should prioritize installation of solar. And this list was selected, or I guess some of the sites were excluded, primarily because of the age of the roof or the need for replacing those roofs in the near future. Some of the sites were included that are subject to Article 97 and some of the other criteria. So based on the tier 1 sites that we have identified, here are some updated economics that I would like to share with you. So instead of 9 megawatts, we are identifying tier 1 options that would be a total of 4.5 megawatts. It will produce about 5.6 million kilowatt hours of electricity. That would represent about 40+% of town's current usage. The total cost of this project would be about $12 million. without any benefit from the federal investment tax credit. If these projects can be completed by December 31st, 2027, so just about 2 years from now, we could qualify, the town could qualify for up to 40% investment tax credit, which would be paid directly to the town by the government, by the federal government. 40% we will qualify if we end up installing US-made equipment, which is pretty common nowadays in large commercial solar installations. So this is not a tough choice that we would have to make. So if we do that, of course, the upfront cost would go down to anywhere from 7.2 million to 8.4 million, depending on the level of ITC. Hi, Cliff.
Yeah, so the question I have is, I don't have my camera working at the moment, I guess, is the savings, $21 million savings, is that a present value number? And if so, what's the discount rate?
It's not a present value number. It does incorporate that this $12 million, so we are assuming that this $12 million would be financed using debt at 3.5% interest rate.
Vikram, I'm going to interrupt for a minute. Cliff, hang on to your question and let Vikram run through his numbers because he's going to talk about that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Vikram. Just keep burning through your deck.
Okay. So there is significant potential to reduce the upfront investment if we could move forward. We believe that doing the solar installation is not a very lengthy process. So if the town is able to make decisions and move the project forward faster, we should be able to accrue this investment tax credit. So as Cliff pointed out, what we are estimating is that the town would save about $21 million. And the savings could be over $27 million if we are able to leverage the investment tax credit. And these savings are net of initial system cost financed with a debt at 3.5% over 10 years. The project currently, as the economics we are sharing, will not be cash flow positive in the first year of operation. We are estimating that the first 3 to 5 years would be cash flow negative, and I'll show you an example of how that looks like. But if we are able to qualify for ITC, we would definitely be cash flow positive year one. So continuing on, our recommendation is to gain better economics, savings in the initial cost of installation. We would do better if we would gain significant cost efficiencies and savings if we can contract the whole project at once. As you can imagine, I think solar installation companies are likely to offer us better prices for a 4.5 megawatt installation versus, call it, a megawatt of installation. So we have identified 3 batches of sites. About 2 megawatts of the proposed installations are at sites in the solar overlay districts, which have been approved over the years by the town in 2010 and 2015. About 2 megawatts of the installations are being planned on 13 roofs, plus 2 adjacent parking lots, including some of our schools. And these have recently been approved by the town as part of the decarbonization roadmap. And the remaining about 0.5 megawatt would be on public parking lots. So I'll show you an example, and I think this one may answer, Cliff, your question a little bit better. So this is an example of, this is one group of installations we are looking at 13 rooftops and 2 adjacent parking lots. The initial estimated cost of this project is $5.6 million, which is projected to produce roughly $20 million of electricity over 25 years. We are assuming a 3% utility rate inflation, which is closer to the historic average. But so we are being quite conservative, I would say, at this point. So if you look at this chart, the blue line is basically highlighting our total annual savings in terms of avoided cost of electricity. The red line is essentially our debt service payments, which is, again, as I mentioned, it's a 10-year debt at 3.5% interest rate. So our annual payments would roughly be about $710,000. So for the first 6 years, we are below our total savings. But then, as you can see, the savings dramatically go up. If we are able to qualify for, and for this example, I'm using 30% ITC. And as you can see from the orange line, our debt payments would be roughly $500,000 a year, and we would be cash flow positive from year one. Let me stop here. I know this is a lot of data. Happy to take any questions.
So, yeah, I want to come back to my, I guess, 2 questions. The first question is the 3.5% interest rate. Is that assuming a tax exempt rate?
That's a municipal bond rate for July of 2026.
Okay, so
Rounded up.
my question there, this is really for Lincoln, or maybe for both of you, is whether or not we're able to get tax credits using tax exempt financing.
You want to answer that, Lincoln?
Yeah, I can help to answer it with the knowledge that I have. Yes. So we're actually pursuing the federal investment tax credits now for projects that were financed with tax exempt. With tax exempt, I would say, just as a point of comparison, who knows? Well, if this was borrowed, if 3.5% is correct, I mean, as a point of comparison, when we went out and did borrowing earlier this year in June, it was at a true interest cost of 4.13%. But it's in the ballpark. But I just want to give that piece of information.
And was that 10-year debt?
That was, some of it was 10 and some was 20, but the true interest cost across, yeah.
So we'd have to think about what the 10-year cost of that was. And I want to get back to my question about present value of savings, because I know that that's a question other people are going to ask. And has there been any, or how difficult would it be to do a present value analysis, looking at various discount rates?
Sure. So Cliff, typically in a situation like this, and Lincoln, you are the expert, so please do jump in. Based on my knowledge of financial analysis, Cliff, that if you are financing using a debt instrument with an interest rate, that is essentially showing you what the call it the net present value is, right? Because you're not outlaying that much cash right now. If we were investing this $5.6 million in cash right now, then yes, we would again look at our cost of capital, which would be either 3.5 or 4.13%, and use that number to calculate the NPV, right? But from my perspective, I think this is an equivalent way of analyzing cash in, cash out.
I'll reserve comment on that.
Sure. Sadaf?
You want to continue? Oh, sorry, Sadaf?
Sadaf has her hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. What does maintenance look like for this? Because you talk about the initial installation, and you just talk about net savings over time, but inevitably there's going to be maintenance costs for this. What does that look like? Why is it not included in here? And
yeah, currently it is not included because we don't have a estimate right now. It will not be hugely significant. I think with a large installation like this, the O&M cost goes down pretty significantly. These systems typically do not require much of a maintenance. Maybe in year 10 or 15, you may end up replacing some of the inverters, but other than that, they typically are hands-free.
Really? And so they don't even require like an annual servicing, like your HVAC system or nothing?
No, nothing. You should not be touching your solar panel systems. If a lot of you may, some of you may have solar at your home. I bet you have not even looked at, you have not touched it in 10, 15 plus years.
Yeah, I don't, so I actually have no idea. Interesting, okay.
That is so I've been in the industry for roughly 20 years in the solar industry, and there is a lot of these solar companies that are marketing and selling solar, typically they will use the fear of, call it maintenance, to sell you on a PPA, a power purchase agreement, rather than the actual requirements of operations and maintenance. But if you start looking at the amount of solar the town will have, I think we'll have many better cost-effective options in case it needs any kind of servicing.
Yeah, and I think it is probably worth in this to benchmark against other municipalities. I think Worcester was an example of a Massachusetts location that has done something similar, and to still, even if you anticipate those costs are small, I think
Yeah.
someone who is or a town, city that has had this installed for a certain amount of time, what are their actual incurred costs, I think is a helpful
Absolutely.
point in here.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it seems like
Yeah.
I always my ears always perk up when I hear, oh, it's going to be negligible, because like
No, it's a fair
nothing you think
point.
is
I think,
negligible is ever negligible.
yeah.
In
Yeah,
my
no, I
experience.
completely concur. We have been very conservative in a lot of our numbers, so I feel comfortable with the potential impact of O&M.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, and then I would, you probably want to model this out based on what, I think Lincoln said 4.1. I mean, whatever that looks like. Whatever the latest is and the recommendation is from town finance is going to be your better benchmark. Thanks.
absolutely. Other questions, folks? Okay, I'll continue and happy to take questions. I have another just couple slides left. So what are we looking for as the next step? So the next step, we are looking for, I guess our ask would be for a budget. Currently, we are putting in brackets about $200,000 to engage a consultant or a solar engineering firm to essentially help us firm up the estimates that we have run so far. So the initial analysis has been done leveraging satellite imagery and other solar analytics software. But in my experience, nothing beats actual site visits, looking at wherever we are thinking of installing solar, understanding what can the roofs actually hold the kind of solar panels we are talking about? What kind of effort might be needed to reinforce those roofs? In terms of ground mount installations or canopy mount installations, are there any complexities that we have missed when we looked at the sites from a satellite? Will we be able to connect these installations to the grid? Does it have enough capacity? What are the nearest transformers where we could? So essentially to have, again, the initial analysis is showing us that there is something there, that this solar installations could be economically viable and helpful for the town. And now what we need to do is to make sure, spend a little bit of money to verify and validate and triangulate and make sure that our numbers are in the ballpark. And the consultant will also help us prepare the specifications for a potential RFP if we so choose to move forward. And we are and we believe that the RFP process would help us deliver even better economics. And I think that is it. Those were the slides. Happy to take questions.
So questions for Vikram? I've heard the recommendation of verifying interest rates. I've heard the recommendation for including something for maintenance. And by the way, my own personal sense is that it will turn out that I think it will make sense for the town to simply engage a third party who would be essentially on call for that kind of a thing, rather than assuming that it's our own building department, who have their own workload cut out for them, and for whom this particular kind of work is not particularly in their wheelhouse, at least it isn't currently. So just a quick thought. So you've heard basically that to launch this, and this is where I think I need the committee sort of thought, because we are creating an opportunity for an operational budget savings, but we're creating a capital debt increase if we choose to do this through the town process, which could be through the CIP, if the select board determined that this was of sufficient importance to them that they would wish to bring this forward in the CIP line, or other forms of financing, which would presumably include bonding. But I also, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the CIP is really, really stressed right now. So I'm not sure that, I mean, unless Melissa tells me otherwise, that's probably not a practical approach. And if we go the bonding route, the question is, we probably don't want to include it in a override coming up in May.
And what's your view about that?
My view?
Yes, you're suggesting that it would not be appropriate as part of an override.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're just adding, more cost onto taxpayers, and that could just peel off a significant number of them from supporting us. Of course, we can't, think that we're going to sneak it in later on. So we have to be pretty transparent about what we're doing, transparent about the need for this, the importance of it, so that people, aren't surprised when maybe we put a debt issue on, I don't know, next election.
And I have suggested perhaps the opposite idea, which is that when faced with an operating override, which no one is particularly happy about, the idea of offering the voter an opportunity to pay a little more, but make an investment, which actually bears a return, unlike most of our overrides, which don't. This might potentially bring people to support.
Yeah.
Override. Or it could be a divided question as well.
Yeah.
So this is something I think we have to think about a little bit and figure out what the approach may be. And I have no doubt that there are many others who will have thoughts. Cliff.
Sorry. Definitionally, wouldn't this have to be a divided question, because this is a debt exclusion versus an operating override? Wouldn't they be separate questions?
Yeah.
That would be my view.
So I mean, I'm not making a recommendation one way or the other. I understand both comments, but having what is actually a fairly modest debt exclusion, if it made economic sense, to go along with an operating override, people, you are not jeopardizing one for the other if they're two completely separate questions.
Cliff,
That's the way
I can't figure out how to raise my hand here, but
ahead, Val.
I don't agree that you don't risk the operating override. If there are lots of things on the ballot, maybe people just vote for the debt exclusion and not the operating override.
You know, that Val, I think that I think I would give the voters more credit because, you know, a debt exclusion for X millions of dollars to, you know, to make money on something, you know, if people appreciate the difference between a debt exclusion and an operating override, what you're saying is that they're going to vote for a debt exclusion at the same time they're voting to reduce services.
Well, I think they're going to look at the calculator and say, this is how much my taxes would go up.
Yeah.
And make a choice on what they think.
Let me, if I may, just offer a little bit of math here. If I understood Vikram's presentation, the debt service we're talking about in round numbers, 700,000 a year. The override numbers that I've been hearing is in tens of millions.
Right. So if there are two questions on the ballot, does somebody think, well, I'm going to do this thing, which is great for 700,000, but I'm not going to do that, you know, $15 million operating override.
I think Val, I think it's fair that somebody might say that, but then I think that same person who would opt for the 700K option versus a 15 million option would probably if they were not given the 700K option, would still not opt for the 15 million option. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah, that's well, yeah, that's probably true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that they would still look at those options, and the punchline for them, or the headline for them, is like, I don't want the $15 million option, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's a different way to look at it. That's how, you know, my gut instinct is that is how people would look at it. I'm not sure in other words, I'm not sure it dissuade somebody from opting for a $15 million operating override who was, you know, already inclined to take it or not take it. I'm not sure it would sway that opinion.
Yeah,
And
I
is
think-
there,
I
I mean, I
think
don't know
the
if
point
town
is
council,
that this is a question that we have to make sure we answer.
Bernard, you're saying that we need to understand if that would dissuade somebody from taking the operating override or voting for the operating override?
Yeah, I mean, you know, what your argument is persuasive to me, but you know, I'm not your typical voter, and I don't have as much confidence in the voters as Cliff does, because you know, people act on irrational things all the time, or irrational, so.
Yeah.
But you know, you know, I don't have the answer. It's just a question that we need to, you know, think about.
Yeah. I didn't. What I said is I think you should give voters more credit, okay, in terms of their intelligence. That's what I said. You're always going to come around to an opinion about this. So you're not going to be able to, and I'm not suggesting this group here should decide, of course we shouldn't, but you're not going to be able to get any sort of certainty if that's what you're looking for. You know, Brookline has often put two different type, not often, but certainly has put two different types of overrides on the ballot at the same time. And there's going to be a pretty active campaign. And if this is, and I don't know that it is, I'm not sure I agree with everything that was said about how to analyze an investment like this, because it is an investment, because you are using up debt capacity. And so on some level, you need to be considering, you know, you're going to be doing this versus that. And maybe it's not the same as a traditional economic comparison, but I don't think I don't think it is a transaction where understanding the present value of those savings over time, because 20 years from now, that dollar that you have as nominal, this goes back to your comments, Sergio, is not worth a heck of a lot today, right? So I personally would want to understand that better, but I think the voters, they're certainly going to be able to understand the difference in what they're being asked. And
I would add to that a couple other thoughts, which Vikram has reminded us of, and I would remind us of it again, that above and beyond the strict, nice feature of insulating the town for some portion of their future electric cost, this becomes a rather important and pivotal part of our entire effort to deal with the carbon footprint of the town of Brookline. And I think town meeting has spoken very loudly and very clearly about their intentions on this point. And this would seem to offer a major lift to that undertaking, as well as these related aspects that the heat island effects and elements of that nature are addressed by components. So it seems to have this is an instrument that has multiple strings to it, each one of which has a very nice note. And I suspect that voters will understand that. If there are any other questions, I see that we are over our time and we do have other things on the agenda. I would like to recommend then that if the committee is in agreement that we're asking Vikram and the Solar Working Group to continue their efforts, to continue to refine what they're doing and to address the questions that this committee has put on the table, to work with Lincoln to create a scenario around the financing that he believes is realistic and to run those numbers against the savings and the maintenance question that's been raised. Is that a correct summary of the committee's view at this time?
Oh, I think it's a correct summary. Question is, we have to do a report leading to a possible override. Question. So, when are we going to get something to include in that report, and is it going to include a recommendation with respect to any possible override?
Well, I can put that back to Vikram. In the discussion group, which has included some rather key people, obviously, Alexandra Vecchio, Director of Sustainability, Commissioner Shute, as the head of DPW, and members of ZEAB. My impression has been that they've been working along pretty well, and they too are running down some of these variables. But if I had to venture a guess, I would say within the month of January. And I don't know how exactly that fits with
So Sergio, I'm not being familiar with what a typical report may look like. I may have to, just have to study a little bit to say, what does a typical report look like, and can we get that in that time frame? Right.
Yeah, we're going to write the report. What we need from you, I think, is the kind of questions that have been raised, and we need to provide answers as best you can. That's all we can do.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
we'll try to be responsive, I think, to the select board schedule, which I'm sure that the town administrator will keep us apprised of.
We're
Okay.
talking about early March.
Say what?
We're talking about early March in general.
That's for the problem of the board's making a decision. So getting you information, I think along the lines that that the town administrator had suggested, which was to pull stuff together by mid-February, if my memory is correct, in order to give you guys time to deliberate. Thank you very much, Vikram, for your time and for joining us. And if committee members are going to have questions, we can gather those questions, send them to me as the chair, and I will see to it that they are forwarded to Vikram for a response.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time and interest in this project. So
thank you all.
Have a great holiday season, folks. Bye.
You too.
Thank you, Vikram. So our next agenda item was to begin a conversation that we had started about a month ago. And I had circulated for everyone a financial impact model known as a FIM by a firm that was engaged by the planning board called RKG. And it was an effort to try to quantify potential revenue, or more importantly, net revenue from development alternatives in the Chestnut Hill West area. I had a very hard time making much sense out of the RKG model, and a list of preliminary questions was put together, and which was also circulated, and I think all of you have seen that. I'm not sure if I may be able to screen share this, if that's helpful. Are you guys seeing this or not? No?
Hard to read it.
That's too small? Is that helping?
I'm reading it on my computer from the website. So,
Can the rest of you just tell me whether you're able to see my screen share?
I can see it.
Yeah, and is it legible?
Yes.
Okay. Again, a lot of the question here, I think, is to what degree have the committee members had a chance to dig into this RKG model themselves, and whether they wanted to add to this list of questions. These were preliminarily forwarded to the planning department, but I made clear that it was not a complete list of questions from the committee. And so again, the question is, do we have additional questions that we can add right now? Or do you want to take some time to review this and submit your questions to me? It struck me that this issue is an important one because I think we've agreed that in general, of the many possible levers that the town has, new growth seems to potentially be the biggest, even though I think, as we saw from the early drafts from Chair Green, and confirmed, I think, by others, that the chances of this revenue showing up within the override period is probably slim to none. That is, in the years 1, 2, 3, which is one of the reasons that it wound up in our committee as something of the futures question. I also have been in communication with the planning director, Cara Bruton, with the idea that she probably wants to come to be with us at some point in January to discuss this perhaps in a little more detail, and in particular, answer the questions that are being raised about the model. And I didn't know whether committee members had other thoughts about this, whether this is not worth pursuing perhaps, or yes, it is, and what your thoughts are.
So Sergio, I do think it's worth sharing the feedback. I did take a look at this, but this was, I guess, maybe a week ago or so, and I didn't spend enough time on it. But one piece of feedback I do have now is around the ratios for the student expectations was actually the same regardless of the size of the unit. So I thought that was really strange, right? So if you have like a single family home that might have 4 bedrooms, maybe even 5 bedrooms, you would so there was a lower and a higher, and then there was a different oh, okay, got it. All right. I misread that question. Okay, so you already have it captured.
Yeah,
Here.
I mean, what we saw was that whether it was a studio, a 1 or a 2 or a 3, the student population was essentially assumed as constant.
Right, exactly, which was strange. I mean,
Counterintuitive.
that's right.
I
Okay,
have-
very good.
I
So
have
it's
since,
improved.
I mean, this is really something that I think Ms. Bruton will need to help us with, but in a side conversation, it did seem to me, at least, that there was some evidence that in this more recent period, the size of the unit and the number of school-age children, in fact, had a rather lower correlation than one would have expected. But
That's
no
true.
expert here.
That's true. I mean, that's what we've heard during our enrollment discussions. I don't know whether that's due to the fact that it's a number of adults who are renting these larger units rather than a family. But she has indicated that historically, at least over the last few years, has been the case, and we've not seen any large enrollment bump based on these kinds of developments.
Cliff?
Yeah, I think this is really kind of interesting. First of all, I couldn't understand what these guys did. I found it to be a very confusing and opaque analysis. Lots of questions, many of which you've raised. But on this particular issue, historically, if you go back in time and you look at housing growth in Brookline and student population, there is no correlation. Okay, so they do not move in tandem, and that is something that our outside consultants have said is true nationally. And the point is that a lot of folks feel that if you build more, you're automatically going to get more students. And that doesn't hold true. And one of the other things that I'm wondering whether or not we're seeing is a reflection of the decline in the birth rate, which again is something else from a demographic perspective that the folks at Cropper McGibbon emphasize, and the sort of the changing population, which would lead to this situation where everyone's expecting larger units to necessarily create more kids in the schools. And all the evidence historically is that you should not be making those sorts of assumptions because it hasn't proven to be accurate. So I'm not necessarily, surprised at the way they're looking at things, the constant kids per unit. I just don't think that there's enough evidence historically to show that if you were to build, for example, only 1-2 bedrooms units around town, that you would have, or 3-bedroom units, that you would have all those filled with kids, which is what people would otherwise be saying.
Yeah, I mean, there have been other examples which I think the superintendent Wong had referenced in some of her school committee meetings about the Hancock Village situation where I think everyone was quite apprehensive. And in fact, if I recall correctly, she reported that there had been a net drop. Val, you may remember this better than I do.
Yeah, that's right. The anticipated influx did not come, and overall there was a net drop, but it's also unclear whether part of that has to do with the folks not coming to
Yeah.
do short-term work. Yeah.
Right. In other words, that the national policies may have kept a certain number of people away. On the other hand, as I understand it, their occupancy rate is quite high. It's not that those units are vacant. So it's an interesting question. And I might add that, like Cliff, I couldn't make heads or tails out of this RKG model. And it was concerning to me because it appears that we are, as a community, using this, or at least the planning board is using this to try to evaluate what the trade-offs are. And I think, as all of you know, there's a citizens advisory group which has been working to try to provide information to everybody about what happens as, let's say, you take off a couple of floors to reduce height. What's the impact on tax revenue and so forth? And they are using as I understand it, a different model, not the RKG model. And it would be useful, it seems to me, if we could try to figure out what's actually going on here. Why is the planning board advancing this particular approach? And why is the Citizens Advisory Group, which is made up, I think, of some fairly thoughtful people who've been involved in development for a long time, why are they using a different one? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait a day or so for anyone who might have on the committee additional questions that are not represented on this list. And then I will submit it as a subcommittee list of questions to Ms. Bruton. Is that a correct sentiment for the committee?
Yes,
Yes, that makes sense.
for me.
Okay.
Val, when is Cropper going to be complete? When are they going to complete their update of the enrollment projections? Because as part of that analysis, they do a demographic review, and they look at a number of different issues that that sort of inform this sort of analysis. And it would be great to have that updated information available, not just to the committee here, but the committees that Sergio just referenced.
Yeah,
The Citizens Advisory Group?
Yep,
I'll connect back and find out, Cliff.
that'd be great.
The Citizens Advisory Group has on it people I think most of you at least are familiar with. I know that it has George Cole from the Building Commission, Ken Lewis from EDAB, Sandy Silk from EDAB. There's another member whose name now escapes me. But important.
And Sergio, the model that they're using, is it the model that Ken created a few years ago?
I believe that's what they're working on. I think you're referencing a model that was developed during your tenure on BFAC.
Yeah.
When Arthur Siegel's grad students developed some materials which were later developed further, refined, upgraded, and improved, as I understand it, by both Ms. Bruton and Ken Lewis.
Yeah.
However, I cannot speak authoritatively on this question. I don't know exactly how they're doing their projections. I do know that they're apparently being able to provide information to the public about literally what happens if you knocked off 2 stories, for example. What does that do to the bottom line? And apparently it's quite dramatic. The last public meeting that I listened to suggested that taking off the top 2 floors was cutting something like $3 to $4 million out of net revenue. That's a big hit. Okay. Anything else on this general question? I gather people are feeling that this is worthy of our time and effort to try to get some consensus around what these models are. I have recently come to the conclusion that I had hoped that new growth might actually help us break the pattern that we are in now of having to do operating overrides every 3 years or so. And regrettably, after the town administrator published the preliminary long-range plan financial information, which I'm sure all of you saw, which I think came out last week, the numbers are quite bleak. And there is simply no way that I can see that new growth is going to make up that gap. It'll help it, but not eliminate it.
So Sergey, I just want to make a comment about that. Every year we see 5-year projections, and every year they get scarier and scarier. And I remember back in 2014, we saw a 5-year projection, and people were extremely surprised. And what Sean, said to everyone is that you have to realize that every year the budget has to be balanced, right? And so you can't look at those. And so when you balance it one year, it changes what the projections are for the next year. And so you can't look at that 5 years and conclude that that is what is going to happen. And so my comment really is that I don't know if new growth or anything else is going to eliminate the need for operating overrides or change a cycle. But I would not be looking specifically at a 5-year budget, which is done conservatively, as what is going to happen. I mean, I wouldn't be as
Yeah, I think all of us that have been around the town for a while recognize that these are all to be taken with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I have not seen the size gap previously of this size in any terms, nominal terms, real terms, however you want to measure it. The way I think about it is 2 lines on a graph, and they're getting further and further apart.
I think the numbers grow, okay, and the base off of which they're starting grow, but I don't think that trend is any different than what I've seen historically.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Okay. We have a few minutes if people are willing to. I thought we might want to just talk a little bit about the framework around the report. Our colleagues on the other 2 subcommittees, particularly the town subcommittee, and I would encourage you guys to, if you haven't, take a look on their town subcommittee website. They have begun to put together an outline of how they see their report as a subcommittee, which I think is useful and probably instructive. There was a general framework originally that came from the town administrator, and I think they've been working somewhat off of that. But I didn't know whether members had some comments or some direction. I personally am not going to be able to do much until after the Christmas holiday. But I would like to try to take a stab at getting something out in the first week of January to the members of our subcommittee for feedback and discussion, and then hopefully maybe do some assignments of component parts that might be authored by some of our members. In that regard, I have, as you probably saw, placed a question before the whole of the Expenditure and Revenue Subcommittee for Thursday around this question of, we are a body that happens to have 4 elected officials, which I think at least most of us don't recall ever having been in that situation previously with this type of study committee, and that the output of this committee should really be from citizens. And that the elected officials have their own platforms, whether it's the school committee or the select board, from which to take positions, from which to advocate for points of view, which may be the same or may be different than what the our committee would put out. And I think I've discussed this a little bit with Chair Green. I've discussed it a little bit with Val and Jesse, and I think there's been a general agreement that this would make sense, but this would come up, I think, on Thursday for a broad discussion. And then from that, we could work towards the question of assigning some authorship around the component parts.
Yeah, by the way, Sergio, I agree with you, because, you know, this committee is, I mean, the elected officials are probably not viewed by the voters as being really objective. And it's the citizens, you know, who don't, in people's view, have a dog in the fight, that are probably more believable.
Okay, good. Well,
I mean, I agree with you on that.
so it may be a short discussion on Thursday.
Well, people may have other views, but
Yeah. Well, no, I think it works to everyone's benefit, and that's been my sense anyway. So for the committee members, do you have any thoughts here as we wrap up tonight that we haven't discussed? I'm going to leave the minutes off. We can vote them at our next meeting. And I'm trying to set up, I'm just curious about one item. I'll be back for the week of the 28th of December, which is right after the holiday. And I don't know whether there are enough of us around that we should try to actually do a meeting between there and New Year's, or whether we're rolling into January.
we can get away with it. We probably should roll into January, because people aren't going to be focused in that week.
Okay.
Or it may not be available.
Right. Okay. Well, then I'll work that out a little bit with Nicole, but that way when we set up a poll, I think we're in agreement then that we'll all last probably be together this Thursday, and then it's going to be a break for 10 days, what it sounds like.
And just as a heads up, I can't make the meeting tomorrow, the full committee meeting. But weigh in on the and I can write a note on this as well, Bernard, so that Chaz has it. But I agree with the prior discussion on elected officials and drafting the document. So I just want to kind of have that on record, so to speak, so everyone is clear in my point of view on that. The other thing I wanted to just share, and Sergio, I had sent you a note about this, but for the rest of the group as well, I've been working on the school model analysis, and I'll be ready to share it, probably mid-January. I'm sharing it at the school subcommittee as well on January 12th. So later on that week would be good.
You already have a school subcommittee meeting scheduled?
Yes. So it's also possible to just, invite people to that meeting if that works. So either one is fine. It's scheduled for the 12th.
Yeah, it might make a lot of sense. I've been, I tried to do that for tonight for the solar presentation. I tried to invite some people who I thought might have some interest.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. I think it'll be, just be more efficient, then everyone can hear.
Right.
So just so that you don't run afoul of the open meeting law, you should probably either invite the full committee or all the subcommittees. Because we've certainly run up against that at school committee, that you can't actually have a full discussion if the meeting isn't properly noticed for
Well,
the participants.
Yeah, it's a good point, Val, but for tonight, for example, for the invitees, they were listen only mode. So.
Understood, and that's what it would be if,
Right,
right, as opposed to being able to have a full discussion on the school model at one meeting, which I thought was what was being proposed.
good
Which
point,
would
Yeah,
make
it's a
some
good
sense to
clarification.
streamline, yeah.
good
Yeah.
point. Okay, good. Val, did you have any other thoughts here before we wrap? No, Cliff?
No,
Okay. Chair Green? Any
Nope.
Any words of wisdom? Then,
Wisdom. Not for me.
very good. We'll see most of you on Thursday. I'll try to take a shot at the minutes again with the help of our AI people.
All right,
Good night,
thank
all.
you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody. Happy
Good night.
holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.